Hello, everyone. It's Jacqueline again here. I'm sorry about the sound issues that we're having. I hope that you have caught part of the couple of first stages that I announced. And I'll just go very quickly through the content of the day. We will be reviewing the sustainable tourism definition again. We will be looking at the difference between sustainable versus responsible destinations. We will look at the Cape Town Declaration, which is the basis of the Sustainable Destinations program, the International Center for Responsible Tourism, who they are, and then the ICRT Canada on the Responsible Tourism Destination Declaration that just happened at a conference in Alberta this summer. So as I was saying earlier, I think it's worth to go through the sustainable tourism definition again. As you know, there are many definitions on sustainable tourism, and Gail will actually provide another one when she does her presentation. But this one by the WTO, the World Tourism Organization, resonates loud and clear when we're talking about destinations because essentially, it states that sustainable tourism development meets the needs of present tourists and host regions, and that those are the destinations. Protecting, enhancing opportunities for their future. This is the visual representation, and some of you will have seen it last week. The equal interaction of these spheres really constitutes sustainable tourism development. So on the environmental sphere, it minimizes the negative environmental impact and makes a positive contribution to conservation primarily. On the social-cultural sphere, it respects culture and traditions and recognizes the rights of all the people involved in decisions that affect their lives and to determine their own future. And then obviously on the economic side, we look at financial benefits to the host community. Now, is responsible tourism different from sustainable tourism? Both responsible and sustainable tourism, they share the same goals, which are, as we said in the previous slide, environmental integrity, social justice, and maximizing the local economic benefit. The difference, though, is the emphasis on responsibility, however, puts the task firmly in the hands of everyone involved in tourism. That's the governments, the product and service owners, the operators, the transport operators, tourists, local communities, NGOs, and industry associations. So I think the word responsibility in itself implies a level of accountability from all of us in the sector. So big or small, everyone does have a role to play. So what is responsible tourism destinations? Now, the Cape Town Declaration, which was drafted in 2002 as part of a side conference that took place in Johannesburg at the World Summit of Sustainable Development, provides, in my view, a comprehensive outline of the key issues that all tourism stakeholders need to address to manage sustainable development. In point number one, we look at how minimizing negative economic, environmental, and social impact. So this minimizes the harm, increasing the benefit in the three key spheres that we talked about. On the second point, generate greater economic benefit, it makes tourism a worthy economic source of income and makes life in the communities better. So that should be one of the key objectives. Point number three, involving local people. It's not a colonial economic relationship that exists between source markets and destinations. As you know, most of the capital flows from north-south. Local people should have a say in tourism development and therefore more control, as we said before, of their future. In point number four, tourism, so conservation of natural and cultural heritage, tourism is an enabler of conservation and diversity and not an agent of homogeneity, where the tourism experience is purpose-built just to look the same as the source market, as home. In point number five, we look how tourism aims to provide authentic and engaging experiences for the tourists. Point number six, on access, I'll actually have a whole slide on that, so I'll address that later. And point number seven, we look about the fact that tourism forges deep human bonds based on respect for the culture, heritage, history, and traditions. So travel in a way should become kind of a life-altering experience if done properly. A little bit about the ICRT, the International Center for Responsible Tourism. It was founded in the UK in 2000 by Professor Harold Goodwin, and he runs the Master's and PhD programs on sustainable tourism out of Leeds Met University. So if any of you are interested in a postgrad degree, check out their website. The ICRT work focuses on the principles of the Cape Town Declaration. The ICRT works in originating markets and destinations around the world to harness the tourism to what they say, make it better places for people to live and for people to visit. They work with governments, tour operators, and accommodation providers to realize the aspirations of the responsible tourism movement, which has played really a major role since 1997, and it is really encouraging to see how much is moving forward. Now, ICRT Canada, continues to model and develop and promote these concepts and guiding principles of the Cape Town Declaration, but it has more of a Canadian context. Now, subsequent conferences in Cape Town address the evolving emerging issues and sustainable development tourism around the globe. Now, I was really lucky to attend the 2008 Kerala in India conference. I presented a research paper there, and I can tell you it was one of those really unparalleled experiences because there were hundreds of tourism providers from across the globe, and all that really expressed that desire to make destinations and tourism business, the tourism business itself really a force for good. So it was an amazing experience. Most of my exposure had always been in the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. So to hear what people in Thailand and Africa were doing was very encouraging. Now, we were lucky to have the opportunity of hosting the ICRT conference in Canada. It was just this past summer in June. And from that conference, there were hundreds of participants from all over the world. Some key themes emerged. One, we had access for all. The other one's called tourism, indigenous tourism, tourism and local economic development in a developed country, governance. Now, I will quickly go through them as I believe that really provides a good perspective on how tourism sustainability and responsible action. They have global themes, but they vary according to the geographical location, the source market, government policies. So the next slides it actually states the full declaration, and they are wordy, but I will summarize, and then you can read them at your leisure. The first one, access for all. So as part of our responsible destination, the declaration states that we should have access for all. So the 5 points listed here acknowledge the emerging need to ensure equitable access for people with disabilities, regardless of what disability it is. It is about ensuring that tourism providers outfit their facilities and transportation services, and this may entail support from the government, and adoption of and implementation of what is known the UN Convention and Protocol on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It also states that tourism suppliers and public services clearly communicate their accessibility, especially since standards, as you know, are very different from source markets and host communities, and they may vary greatly. Above all, that inclusion of disabilities in tourism become part of the everyday operation. It is included in the design of the physical plans and services, and it is not really treated as an exception. And then Gail will give an example of initiatives currently in place. You can see that this is gaining worldwide momentum. Everyone should have the right to enjoy destinations, and our industry really should aspire for that inclusiveness. The next one is polar tourism. So polar tourism, as you know, is on the rise, but polar regions are very fragile and extremely vulnerable environments. Now, the Declaration on Polar Tourism recognizes that unplanned development will hurt the environment. The lack of consultation with indigenous communities will lessen the economic development drawn from tourism, that the lack of inclusion of indigenous traditions and lifestyles will erode the culture for future generations. Now, responsible development at the public and private sector is really critical to the preservation of these values, the natural and cultural assets that we possess in this country and that we're very lucky to have and we need to preserve. The next point is the Declaration on Indigenous Tourism. This seeks to recognize the need for collaboration between developers, governments, and indigenous communities. It talks about building capacity so these communities can become self-sufficient, self-managed, and are active participants in shaping their own future. We know the issues are very complex, but a responsible destination must provide a very genuine experience, and to deliver, it must embody and honor the spirit of the indigenous communities, of which we have many in this country and with a very rich culture. The other point is local economic development in developed countries. Now, since much of tourism is in developing economies, as we were talking about these colonial lines earlier on, the declaration addresses the issue of economic benefit in developed countries like Canada. If you go through it, though, you can see that it follows a very similar stakeholder multi-level engagement process. Many communities in Canada are very poor, unfortunately, and tourism can be used for economic development. Companies in the extractive sector, which I work with a few through Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, they seek what is called a social license to operate. So this is over and above whatever compliance issues they may have to deal with as a government. You know, and although tourism may not be as seen as damaging as, I don't know, let's say mining or oil extraction, it has the potential to disrupt the environment and the traditional culture in irreversible ways. So we need to be really aware of this and seek collaboration and this social license to operate. The next two slides, the final slides actually, are on governance, and it addresses the basic principles that if you think of responsible tourism, you know, if you think of the well-being of the local people first, implicitly it will make it a better place to visit. If the host community hates getting tourism, and you know that many of them do, and we have been to places like that, then this hostility really destroys the whole visitor experience. It also states that tourism destinations are public assets, right? You may have studied in school the tragedy of the commons. I mean, this is held in common, and therefore it needs the support of institutions and governments to create an infrastructure that supports sustainability for the beaches, natural landscapes, archaeological sites, and so on. It also addresses the fact that tourism is very localized, but is managed often at a national level with many competing and conflicting interests among politicians. And often the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and money and resources are wasted or they are misplaced, which is extremely unfortunate, but it happens more often than not. Well, finally, you know, governments should also include the oversight of equitable distribution of tourism investment benefits. You know, in some places, especially in developing nations, they provide, give multinationals, you know, they give breaks and corporation tax breaks in perpetuity. And this may, in the long run, hurt the development of the local economy because there is no sustained collection of taxes to invest back. This is an economic issue, and it's a delicate one and very complex. But that's something to keep in mind in terms of the equitable distribution of the benefits. Then tourism development for a country or a region must have a business strategy, which really looks at tourism receipts in economic terms, but also makes a case for the value of assets, which some are intangible, you know, they don't have a price on it. They, you know, environment, cultural diversity, heritage. If you take that away, and any tourism benefit will be short term. And remember that responsible destinations embody the whole idea of intergenerational justice. So that's for the host community, for the children and the grandchildren, and also for our tourists, so that they may enjoy a place that is genuine and pristine. So basically, that is it. I know that this is a lot of information, but I hope that it will all come together in the next presentation. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Gail Henry, who is the Sustainable Tourism Product Specialist for the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the CTO. Now, I have had the pleasure of working with Gail on a couple of CTO Sustainable Tourism conferences where I have presented or moderated panels, and she will no doubt provide you with the most comprehensive summary of Caribbean sustainability that 30 minutes or 25 minutes can give you. So here I leave you with Gail.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jacqueline, for inviting me to do this presentation on sustainable tourism destination best practices. I will give the audience a Caribbean perspective on sustainable tourism in terms of how the Caribbean is promoting sustainable tourism and implementing sustainable tourism initiatives. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the format of the presentation.
Gail, just for a second, because we're having a bit
Pardon?
of issues with
Okay.
sound, would you be able to turn your speakers off? I just want to, we're getting a little bit of feedback. And if the
Right.
participants can give us also a
Sure.
feedback whether you can hear her clearly or not.
Okay, I've muted it.
Okay, I think, oh, that's better. Perfect.
Right, okay, I'll continue now. I just wanted to give an idea of the presentation format. And first of all, I want to give the participants an idea of who we are as an organization, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, what our services are to our members, what the sustainable tourism portfolio looks like, and then I will go into the meat of the presentation, which is looking at key sustainability issues that are affecting the Caribbean, as well as some of the initiatives and implementation challenges, followed by just a wrap-up in terms of where we go from here in terms of Caribbean tourism sustainability. The Caribbean Tourism Organization is really, as we consider ourselves, the main tourism development agency that is focusing on the tourism industry within this Caribbean region. We are a public sector organization. Our membership is very diverse in the sense that we have over 30 government members representing our different Caribbean destinations. Private sector, including hotels, airlines, cruise lines, travel trade, and other tourism service providers, as well as non-governmental organization members. We are headquartered in Barbados, as was mentioned at the beginning of Jacqueline's presentation, I believe. And we have marketing operations in New York City, London, and Toronto. Our mission is really to provide to our members the services and information that they need to develop tourism in a sustainable manner within their respective destinations for the ultimate economic and social benefit of Caribbean people. And our services, as I mentioned before, are also very diverse in the sense that we span activities from marketing the Caribbean as a region. Also, we assist in developing the human resources that work within the Caribbean tourism sector. We provide research and information technology services, as well as communications to our members, and of course we assist our member countries in terms of their sustainable tourism development plans. Jacqueline mentioned a definition of sustainable tourism before, and there are many, as she mentioned, but the Caribbean Tourism Organization some years ago actually developed its own definition of sustainable tourism, which is quite similar to the one that she quoted from the UN World Tourism Organization. Ours focuses on defining sustainable tourism as the optimal use of social, natural, cultural, and financial resources for national development in a way that is equitable and self-sustaining, with towards the end of providing a unique visitor experience as well as an improved quality of life through partnerships among government, the private sector, and communities. This definition is part of an overall sustainable tourism policy framework that was developed by the Caribbean Tourism Organization, I think in 2008. And the overall vision of this policy framework is that we are basically trying to facilitate the sustainable development of Caribbean tourism so that it becomes a sector that is viable, resilient, of high quality, promotes empowerment and ownership, as well as it allows us to continue to embrace integration within the Caribbean region. The Sustainable Tourism Policy Framework provides a number of guiding principles, development goals, and policy objectives with the idea of being a guide to our member countries so that in developing their own or enhancing their own tourism policies and strategies, etc., that they would use these principles so that they can ensure that their tourism development is being done in a sustainable manner. Part of our sustainable tourism or service to our members is to assist them to develop their own capacity in this area, as well as to recognize, good practices in terms of sustainable tourism. And we've been doing this in a number of different ways. I just wanted to highlight a few key ones to you here first. Since in order to really, I would say, get sustainability tourism messages across to our members, we have been staging an almost annual ecotourism conference since, well, between the years really of 1991 and 1996. And since the concept of and the acceptance of sustainable tourism evolved, there was a decision that the conference focus should be expanded really to become an annual Caribbean conference on sustainable tourism development. And since 1997, we've been staging these annual conferences in various member countries. And they all fall under the theme, the overarching theme basically of keeping the right balance. Over the years, we've had a number of different themes ranging from general themes such as unlocking the potential and working together to very specific themes like focusing on things like communities and environments and using, developing sustainable tourism through diversity, etc. Our next Sustainable Tourism Conference will be held in Guyana in April, and that will be next year. We also try to as I mentioned, recognize and reward, in a sense, good practices in sustainable tourism. And we've been doing that through our Caribbean Excellence in Sustainable Tourism Awards. And in fact, we've just expanded it to include a number of different areas of, in terms of the tourism sector. And we've expanded to include accommodation, community, heritage, special events, wild and marine life, as well as looking at giving an individual awards as of next year. Another way in which we've been getting the sustainability messages across and highlighting what is being done in the Caribbean region is really through an initiative with Travelmole called Vision Express, which is a sustainable tourism quarterly newswire. And basically, in that newswire, we are highlighting not just what the Caribbean Tourism Organization as an organization itself is doing, but also the membership of that organization. And it was recently launched in August, and we are just in the process of actually preparing the second edition of this newswire. And we'd be happy to include you on our circulation list should you be interested in accessing the newswire. We also have as one of the committees of CTO a Sustainable Tourism Technical Committee, which is really charged with advancing sustainable tourism on behalf of our members. And this committee meets from time to time, and what we do is we try to discuss some of the challenges to sustainable tourism and how best CTO can assist our members in addressing those challenges through our work programs. We have also been building capacity specifically through training of our members, through webinars such as this one, as well as through workshops, and these are done, at the request of our members and also within the body of our conferences. Okay, I will just tell you a bit about some of the key sustainability issues that are affecting the Caribbean region. Sustainable tourism really depends on the availability of natural resources, landscapes, and ecosystem services, especially in terms of water and biological diversity, etc. And that is why environmental management is so key to tourism sustainability. And this can manifest itself in different forms in terms of the need to conserve biodiversity, which is becoming an increasing challenge in the face of climate change. And this really requires management of natural resources on land and in the ocean and along our coastal areas, which really are key facets of our tourism product offering. Additionally, the management of water as well as how we use energy is also becoming increasingly a challenge, especially as I mentioned with respect to water in particular and the potential reduction in water supply as we start seeing the impacts of climate change in terms of levels of precipitation decreasing. And so therefore, these are serious considerations in sustainable tourism programs throughout the region. The management of waste is another key issue, and this waste could manifest itself in terms of solid waste as well as in wastewater management. And there are several agencies within the region that are undertaking pilot projects and other initiatives in this area within the tourism sector and in general for the Caribbean populations. And this is expected to become an increasing challenge with population growth, and when we have increased demand for waste management, especially during our peak winter season in particular within the Caribbean region, where we have a dramatic increase in visitor arrivals in most of our destinations. So these are very important issues, as I mentioned, that are being addressed and will be increasingly addressed in the region. In terms of environmental management, I would say that there are many different aspects of this in terms of terrestrial and marine biodiversity, coastal zone management issues, the need for certification of things like our beaches, marinas, hotels, attractions, etc., that take into consideration environmental management issues and try to encourage better environmental management. Within the Caribbean region, there are a number of initiatives happening, not necessarily being spearheaded by the tourism industry, but that are looking into increasing the number of protected areas through national parks, marine protected areas, and innovative initiatives such as an underwater sculpture museum that was actually developed in Grenada. And this museum is really comprised of sculptures on which corals grow. So it's essentially an initiative that is for recreational purposes in the sense that divers can benefit from seeing the beautiful sculptures, but it's with a purpose. It's art, as I said, with a purpose. And the purpose is really to regenerate reefs, and Grenada is the only one that's in the Caribbean region, has the only one in this region. There are a number of international protocols and national legislation that regulate environmental management issues, regulating things like hunting through zoning laws, and the need for environmental impact assessments for tourism projects. There are a number of public educational programs and programs within schools that speak to the issue of environmental management. There are also NGO and community initiatives such as sea turtle patrols in Trinidad and other countries where leatherback and other turtles come to nest, etc., beach cleanups, and a number of different areas. Some other environmental initiatives that we see throughout the Caribbean involve the coastline. For instance, the coastal boardwalks that were developed in Barbados, and these coastal boardwalks were is not just for aesthetic purposes, but it really is to protect the coastline from coastal erosion. And there are a number of other initiatives in terms of things like mangrove replanting, recycling initiatives, etc. And we are continuing to encourage our membership to Globe and Blue Flag, which looks at marinas and beaches, certification for beaches and marinas. I wanted to highlight an environmental management regional level initiative at this point, and it's called the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. It's a joint initiative of the Nature Conservancy and the United Nations government at the moment, and its goal is really to establish by 2020 um, effective national systems for marine and coastal protected areas that cover at least 20% of the marine and coastal environments in the nearshore area. This initiative is currently winding down in terms of its phase one, but it will go into a second phase. And what it is doing, it is building capacity within the countries that are participating to develop master plans to protect for their protected area systems, as well as assisting them in the process of declaring new protected areas. And it's doing so also by supporting them with grants so that they can implement activities towards this end, and assisting them with financing, developing finance mechanisms beyond this so that they can continue what they have started under this initiative, as well as I mentioned, building their capacity to plan for and manage these protected areas. At the national level, there are a number of initiatives going on throughout the region as well. One of them that I wanted to highlight was what is called the Turtle Village Trust in Trinidad and Tobago. This is a huge project set up to really manage a project which is really hinged on the protection of the nesting leatherback turtles in Trinidad and Tobago. And Trinidad and Tobago has one of the largest populations of nesting leatherback turtles. Um, this is done. This was spearheaded actually by some private sector companies, and they are working basically with 5 community groups towards this end. And their goal is really environmental protection beyond the leatherback turtles as well. And it's beyond the environmental protection. I mean, obviously, through initiatives that the community is involved in terms of promoting tourism, ecotourism, and so on in that particular area, the community is going to benefit through sustainable livelihoods in particular. The Caribbean is really, I mean, it's not the only area, but is also affected by natural disasters, but to varying extents. And it is really this vulnerability that has led to the adoption of a regional approach to managing disaster risk and building a culture of safety, and in so doing, enhancing visitor safety. There are a number of organizations that are involved in disaster management in the Caribbean region, and at the regional level, one of the major ones is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is supported by a network of national disaster management organizations in our various countries. And they are working together to really implement a comprehensive disaster management strategy for the region. And they've set up structures at the national level in order to do that. One of the things that has resulted from our relationship with the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency is the development of a regional disaster risk management strategy and action plan for the tourism region, which is really a guide to our member destinations as to how to enhance or develop disaster risk management energy, water, and waste management. I wanted to point out that the CTO has been involved together with the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association in past initiatives where we have provided environmental management or developed environmental management system guides for the hotel sector, for instance. CTO is also currently engaged in an energy efficiency and renewable energy project, which is aimed at assisting Caribbean hotels in managing energy and in moving more towards the use of renewable energy, example solar energy, for instance. We have also, in the past, that we continue to encourage, as I mentioned, the subscription to certification systems. But in any event, if organizations and in the tourism industry do not want to buy into one of these certification systems, essentially, we encourage them to implement these environmental management systems. In terms of water management, there are many examples throughout the region in terms of managing the supply of water through rainwater harvesting systems. And there are several examples of this that I can think of in particular. For instance, in St. Lucia, this is one of the initiatives that is being done, and we hope to encourage these sort of initiatives throughout the region. I mentioned before the issue of climate change, and climate change is not just a buzzword. I think that climate change is being seriously addressed within this region in the sense that we are preparing for any future additional or aggravated effects of climate change. And one of the key agencies in this region is the CARICOM community. And they are, through the Caribbean Climate Change Center, they have really spearheaded the development of a declaration on climate change for the region, which sets the framework for how the CARICOM countries within the region will address climate change through adaptation and mitigation strategies. And coming out of this declaration, the follow-up to that was the development of an actual implementation plan that will support this framework, as well as a number of adaptation projects that are ongoing and being spearheaded by various agencies within the region. Unfortunately, we don't have time to really go into a lot of these projects, but there are a number of organizations, including UN organizations and other regional organizations that are very much involved in implementing climate change related projects generally across the board for countries, as well as on a sectoral level, including for the tourism sector. The other pillar of sustainability refers to the economic aspect of it. And one of the main challenges here, of course, given that the tourism sector is a critical driver of economic development in many of our destinations, is the question of how do you really balance economic development against the pressures that will or are being experienced in terms of managing the environment, as well as managing pressures in terms of socio-cultural pressures. And some of the responses to this have been, especially at the national level, have been in terms of empowering communities through capacity building and specifically training, etc., so that, as Jacqueline mentioned before, they can, manage and take charge of developing tourism within their own communities, and looking at it as well from a sustainable tourism perspective. And throughout the region, there are a number of community-based tourism projects, and I mentioned some of the countries here, Trinidad, Jamaica, Guyana, Dominica, etc. And the good thing about these initiatives is that many of them in countries like Dominica and Guyana and Belize and so on that have indigenous populations is that the indigenous communities are very much involved in managing some of these projects within their respective communities. And a lot of these projects are geared also towards looking at environmental conservation and so on. So definitely, at the national level, especially, we're seeing that these messages are getting through about, needing to balance the economic development aspects of it with these other pressures that I mentioned. A key challenge in terms of planning for tourism sustainability has to do with um, getting the sustainable tourism principles incorporated into tourism policies, master plans, programs, etc. And this is one of the things that our sustainable tourism policy framework has tried to impart to our members. And we have seen evidence that that is getting through, because if you look at some of the tourism policies and master plans and so on throughout the region, some of them speak very definitely and some of them are really focused on tourism sustainability. However, as in other destinations, these tourism sector policies and plans often go through changes when political administrations change. So that is a key, issue in some of our destinations in terms of how to maintain the momentum that was gained, as well as whether or not they have the capacity for implementing these policies, plans, programs, and projects. That is a challenge in some of our member countries. Another challenge would be looking at how do you deal with tourism sustainability, etc., in terms of varying socio-economic conditions across the region and diversity of the tourism product itself, because we have destinations that are very much still sun-sea and sand focused, and then you have others that are more heavily on the other end of the spectrum, looking at things like ecotourism, etc. And in the face of all of this is that given the current economic challenges that are being experienced globally, economic resources are limited, and so how do governments prioritize sustainability in terms of their national programs and so on? This is really a challenge. And how do we continue projects that are started under donor funding, using donor funds, and we have many donors present in this region, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, etc., that are providing funds for a lot of projects at the regional and national level. One of the answers to this has been that I'm seeing across the region is that increasingly innovative financing mechanisms, for instance, to address the financial part of it, or the sustainability of financing part of it, is the establishment of different things such as the varying types of funds by governments, such as a tourism challenge fund that the island of Montserrat is implementing, where groups and individuals, etc., can basically submit project proposals to be funded. There are other initiatives that are coming from outside, such as the Virgin Branson Center for Entrepreneurship that is located in Jamaica, and this is another way of encouraging entrepreneurship within the tourism sector, as well as, I believe, in related sectors. And we are also going to be increasingly encouraging the sustainable financing of sustainable tourism initiatives using the goodwill, I guess you can call it, of travelers. And this is something that we are increasingly going to be paying attention to, because I don't think it is as widespread within the region as it really should be. I wanted to specifically highlight one of the points that Jacqueline mentioned earlier in relation to responsible tourism, and that is making sure that everyone has access to tourism, to travel, etc. And one of the initiatives that the government of Barbados has implemented is something called Fully Accessible Barbados. This is a program where they are basically evaluating and giving public recognition to properties, hotels, shopping malls, etc., that really are striving to make sure that their properties are accessible to persons with disabilities. And credit to the government of Barbados for that, and it's something that we hope that will spread throughout the Caribbean. And the properties are actually awarded what we call FAB Awards, Fully Accessible Barbados Awards, so that there's a public, recognition that yes, they have achieved, they have instituted certain standards in terms of facilities, services, etc., that the disabled traveling public would, look forward to receiving. And this is something that is growing within Barbados, and as I said, it's something that we are trying to encourage, and it's part of sustainable and responsible tourism. I just wanted to end up basically by saying that as a organization, the Caribbean Tourism Organization will basically continue to work on our own, as well as increase our efforts to find partners who will work with us to promote sustainability in the tourism sector and to address a lot of these challenges that we mentioned, as well as to identify and to make available to our members opportunities that are focusing on the three pillars of sustainability: environmental, socio-cultural, and economic. And we definitely need the support of the travel trade in terms of promoting our sustainable tourism initiatives, and likewise through our chapter system, we work with the travel trade in terms of assisting them to better promote the Caribbean destinations, as well as what we're doing in terms of tourism sustainability and in general for the region. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gail, for your comprehensive and insightful presentation. The Caribbean is one of the most tourism-intensive regions in the world, I think, after the Mediterranean. And, not counting the U.S. destinations like Florida or Las Vegas, it really is one of the largest leisure markets for Canada. So, Gail, in terms of, just to put things into perspective, scale and complexity of adopting sustainability, how many travelers, both visitors, stay-put visitors, and cruise passengers visit the Caribbean, let's say in 2010, or any other statistics that you may have?
Okay. I think in terms of stay-over arrivals, we have approximately 20 million that visit, and we're talking about in terms of Caribbean, our member countries, which span the majority of the Caribbean region. And I think for cruise passengers, it's like on average maybe about 23 million or so cruise passengers visit annually.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, because that, I think, wrapping up all the initiatives that you listed, and looking at the fact that you're dealing with 20 million passengers, 23 million cruise ship passengers, and you have 33 island nations, right, that are part of the CTO. Is it 33,
yes,
right?
roughly. I think roughly. It's about 32 or so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it goes up or down depending on the membership, right?
Right, yeah.
So what is really interesting for Canada, this is how relevant it is for Canada. It is the largest leisure market, right? It is obviously a National Geographic market because it is within the 3 to 5.5 hour range for mid-sized aircraft. And,
yes.
And for most tour operators, the Caribbean represents upwards of 75% of the total capacity. And I know this well because of my previous life as a mainstream tour operator. So this statistic alone, so the scale of the number of passengers, the percentage that the Caribbean represents to the Canadian leisure market, should be more than an incentive to collaborate with destinations in the Caribbean to help them become much more sustainable. So I think it's something for us to keep in mind. I know from my tour operating experience when we had such huge capacity into the region, and then a hurricane would hit or some other natural disaster would happen, and then we would essentially wipe out the majority of the places that we send passengers to. And therefore, we have a vested interest in Canada to work really closely with organizations like the CTO and to ensure that we preserve the beautiful Caribbean region and the destinations where we send people, right? Okay, so we have a little bit more time. We'll run a little bit over simply because we started late because of the sound issues. So we have a question for you, Gail.
Okay.
I think you can read it, but I'll repeat it. What are some of the biggest challenges that the CTO faces when it has to deal with 33 or 32 nations all with diverse needs and interests?
Okay, that's a very good question. Well, I think I mentioned it actually in one of my slides on the presentation where I was talking about the fact that you have countries at different levels, first of all, I should say, of economic development. Even though I guess all of us are developing countries, you have some that are more diverse in terms of their economic structure. Like, for instance, they may be more into manufacturing and the energy sector, etc., as in Trinidad, where tourism is maybe not as key to, their economic development. And then you have others where they are extremely dependent on tourism. We have a range of tourism products, as I mentioned, the sun, sea, and sand type of product, and then you have some that are more diverse or leaning towards like ecotourism and more, community-based tourism type of products, etc. So I think understanding from their perspective, the issues from their perspective is a challenge, and you have to find really tailor-made solutions at the national level sometimes because of, how how important the tourism sector is to them, and the types of resources and attention they devote to it, and it's yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but we work with our respective members to try to meet their needs as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you have the challenge of administrations changing over, right?
Right.
And you
Definitely.
have the Caribbean wide initiatives that require the collaboration of all the governments. And then you have the local initiatives as well.
Right.
So that it's always a bit of a juggling act for
Right.
the CTO,
Right.
I guess.
Well, in terms of, I'm glad you mentioned regional versus maybe national level and other types of initiatives. I mean, we work at both levels in terms of addressing specific national needs. And we also work at the regional level where we try to get, a lot of the donor agencies, for instance, if we get funding from them, once obviously you have to implement regional level projects. So you have to find those countries, that have that commonality in terms of the issues to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have another question from Sonia, and you mentioned the climate change declaration, the issues around how climate change affects the region. And can you describe some of the elements of implementation or examples for some of the specific projects? And I know from some of the work that we've done around climate change, Carib Save, the CCCC, the Climate Change Caribbean Initiative, which is, I think it's based in Guyana, is it?
The 5Cs, they're based in Belize.
In Belize, sorry, they're based
Belize.
in Belize. So perhaps
Yeah.
you can just give some of the examples, because I know a lot is being done, and it will help to clarify how we move from the conceptual side of climate change affecting everybody to actually having mitigation strategies and adaptation strategies for the region.
Okay. Well, I already mentioned one area, which is in terms of disaster management. One of the impacts of climate change is the possibility of having maybe more intense hurricanes, etc. And so we have been working together with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and that is how we actually developed the Disasters Management Strategy and Action Plan to assist our countries to be able to better manage those types of risks, not just from hurricanes, but other types of disasters. The CARICOM Climate Change Center that you mentioned, they are really the CARICOM secretariats in terms of addressing climate change at that regional level for the CARICOM group of countries. in the Caribbean. So the declaration is fairly new, and so they've actually just completed an implementation plan that will support the strategy, but it has to be approved by the CARICOM heads of government. So nothing officially has been implemented under that umbrella yet because it's very, very new and yet to be approved by the CARICOM heads of governments. However, the Climate Change Center has been operating for many years, and they have been implementing a number of projects looking at things like what is happening in terms of the coral reef bleaching, which is another impact of climate change. Um, there are other initiatives, for instance, out of organizations such as the GEF, Global Environmental Facility. There's an integrated watershed management program that is going on. And so all of these things are that is to address the issue of water resources in the face of possibly increasing droughts, etc. And I think that a lot of these organizations will eventually fall under that umbrella in terms of positioning themselves to implement aspects of this implementation plan that was developed. There are other organizations such as Carib Save, which are looking specifically at looking first of all, doing some groundwork in terms of the scientific aspect of climate change, in terms of what are the specific risks to Caribbean destinations. So they have done some groundwork in this area in terms of identifying the risks and then recommending some of these strategies that government need to implement at the national level. For instance, the issue of maybe the coastal erosion that may happen with in more intense these hurricanes, etc. Looking at issues that affect communities in terms of their livelihoods being changed because of climate change impacts, etc. So it's very, very broad.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot of work. Some of the islands have already had a carbon footprint, and focusing on the whole issue of adaptation, which is absolutely critical. As you say, there's going to be an increase in the frequency and the intensity of natural disaster hurricanes or issues around water shortages or rising sea levels and so on. This island, the effect of climate change has to be more adaptation. While on our side, I guess the source markets is more around the whole mitigation of how to reduce our carbon footprint. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So I'd like to thank you very much, Gail, for your time. You're very busy the last couple of weeks, and we really appreciate having a perspective of the Caribbean region because it is an extremely critical area for us in Canada. We have been long supporters of many of the islands there for many years in large volumes, and I really don't think that there is a full understanding of the amount of work that it's being done. Of course, I personally have worked with the CTO for many years now, and I am very intimately aware of the efforts that are taking place. So I thank you very much for sharing this with us, and we'll call upon you again soon if all right. So thank you again. And if anybody actually has any other questions that they may think after we finish the session, please email them to us, and we'll send them to Gail to respond. So thank you very much, Gail.
Thank you, Jack.
So to close, then don't forget that we have the RTTF Leadership Award. So please submit your nominations. You can, I believe, self-nominate or nominate a colleague or another company. We also have the RTTF website, the CA. It has been redesigned and it's coming on this week. The presentation will be made available to you, the presentations today, mine and Gail, both as a PowerPoint and as a recording is made available. So we have 4 more webinars, and we're looking forward to having you participate. So if you haven't done so already, please register and do tell anybody you know about them. And once again, I would like to thank our sponsors who have supported us for many of them actually for the last 5 years, Ryerson University, Air Canada, Delta Chelsea, eContact, and of course the Baxter Travel Media, who is the organizers and that have made a great decision to help advance sustainability in the tourism sector. So thank you, everyone. Apologies for the issues around the sound. We will try to sort this out for the next session. So please join us for the green accommodation one.
The moderator has terminated this call.